All right, so we're still talking about proteins, and what that had to do again was gluten is a protein that's in wheat. So I talked about this, and then I listened to a bunch of talks yesterday, actually about the microbiome, because I was getting to read, like half of you have turned in your papers about mindfulness and stuff. And so if you haven't, yeah, please do, or continue with that. I wanted to remind you all that this Friday, 2 days from today, your Healthy April is due by then. So your healthy 33 days that you've all been doing, like eating fruits every day or something. So Amber got it in and nobody else has. Amber was telling me, that's okay, because you continued with that. And then, so you're typing up what you did for the 33 days. So like Jared gave up fast food, and so why he did it. And we had a talk before class with several of us that we all know why we need to give up fast food if you're eating fast food, how it went. And so like somebody told me they had a cheat day here and there. I know several years ago when I did this, there was one gal who was a waitress and she gave up French fries. And if you're a waitress, I didn't fully understand, but everybody buys the waitresses, they're like, want to be generous, a plate of French fries for the kitchen staff. And so she said, every time you walk into the kitchen, it was like a bar restaurant, so of course they have fries. There is this huge plate of French fries and tater tots just there, and you're on your feet for 6 hours, 8 hours, going back and forth, and you just grab a couple. And she's like, it's terrible for us. And everybody's being so kind and generous and putting this plate of crap food. So she gave up French fries for the month. And everybody, when they're turning in their month, everyone had, okay, I had a blip this day because it was grandma's 89th birthday and I had cake and ice cream. And I'm like, you know what? It's grandma's 89th birthday, have cake and ice cream. But she was the only one who didn't have a blip. So if you have a blip, do write up and say, yeah, like I got off my treadmill and there was the case of Gatorade there. That has been staring at me for 30 days. Actually, what some people do, like give up fast food, is they'll admit, okay, on day 34, I went out and had fast food with my friends. And I have to tell you what happened, because everybody tells me the same story of what happens when they go back and try what they had. And they're like, wow, did I always feel like that? But anyway, so she actually was the only one who did not. And the other thing that was really cool is she's like, but I needed something. So she started bringing in like grapes. And so she would bring in a plate of fruit and leave it there. And so everybody started having a name for her, or a plate of like healthy vegetables and things. And so she was having this like ripple effect on all the waitresses who were working there, because everybody was like, you know, after the first few days, the first people like would make comments and stuff, and she was just, they were like, this is awesome. This is so much healthier than what we used to do. It's interesting because Geno's, we used to go there like once a month as like a bonding thing. And everybody would get the plates of French fries and stuff. And when they first opened, they had a platter of vegetables, of mixed vegetables, and like nowhere has that anymore and stuff. And so I honestly, since COVID, I stopped going out before that, and now have no desire because nothing's open anymore except crappy food places, which is interesting. But I encourage you to keep it up. But what change are you going to make for the next 33 days? And you really need to start that because our class is done in like 33 days. So if you haven't started the next change, you need to start today or tomorrow. And it needs to be, I would encourage you to continue what you're doing, but you need to add something onto it. So it might be, it was a discussion also Jared and I had, and he said he's going to give up soda. And so if you're somebody who's drinking soda, please do give that up. But I commented to him, it should be actually all sugary drinks, because often when students give up soda, they replace it with like a lemonade and stuff. And so it's just as bad. And so he was talking to me, and I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this. He was going to do like the sparkling waters and stuff. And my comment to him was, do you know, they don't have any kind of sweeteners. They don't add sucralose or the alcohol.
LaCroix doesn't.
Yeah, so there you go. So just check for that, because the artificial sweeteners, so I was listening to a bunch of talks yesterday on the microbiome, and they all were talking, because there's just been an explosion of studies that have been coming out, that those artificial sweeteners destroy your microbiome. Nothing destroys it better than them. And so even though I'm going to talk about protein and some of the issues with animal protein and microbiome and stuff like that, nothing compares to all the artificial crap. That stuff just destroys it. And anyway, as does gluten. Everybody has a gluten intolerance. So it could be, that's like for this week, you're trying to give up if you eat bread. And this one guy, actually, it was really interesting. He found, like, I gave up gluten several years ago, and he found he can't do bread. He absolutely cannot. It triggers whatever his reaction is, but he can actually do pastas. Now, to me, it doesn't really matter, because what's happened in the past couple of years, which wasn't there 8 years ago, is you can buy lentil pastas. Like, you just have to make any kind of non-wheat pastas yourself, but they're actually not astronomically priced. Like, you could only find them at Whole Foods, and they would be like $10 for a box. And I'm like, I'm not gonna pay $10. I'm not a huge pasta fan, because they're still highly processed, and I'm half Sicilian, so that's kind of sacrilegious to admit that. But there's edamame noodles or rice noodles. Like, I just do rice noodles. I finally learned how to cook them, which you don't cook rice noodles like any other noodles. So you have to read the instructions the first time and stuff, but they're amazing and wonderful. So there's so many, and it's so easy now. And so it's not looking that, hey, this says gluten-free, but it's highly processed. That's not what I'm encouraging you to do. It's to say, okay, because we all do have this gluten intolerance, and students are like, no, I'm not going to give it up. And it's because it's an addiction. And so I went through this really fast at the end, and I wanted to go through it. It does alter your behavior. And it is, when this guy was talking about last night, it was actually really cool. I think he does actually have a doctorate, because they had doctor as his name, but it's in nutritional sciences. And he was actually a professional, I think it was golf. He just wanted to play golf his whole life, and then he had some kind of injury, and he could no longer play golf, and like, he was pretty much on his back, and he was talking about how he got a belly and stuff. And so he started studying nutrition, and he's extremely charismatic. So that's probably going to be part of one of the things you get to watch next week. But it made me think of like Stephen, because that's something his story is very different, but like, he wants to go into nutritional sciences. And so these guys, it's not that they're a medical doctor that have information, because medical doctors have no nutritional background at all. Their background is drugs. They're pretty much drug dealers. And a lot of you are wanting to go into like nursing and things like that. And I'm like Miranda and I had to talk about this, and it's like, they're drug pushers now. That's all. It's changed in the past 20 years, that it's all become about, they don't do anything. But there are, like, you guys want to go into it because you want to help people. And so, but there are things you can do. And I think it is going to change. So I would still encourage you, like, look into nursing, but don't get stuck in, okay, I'm just going to go and be working in old folks' home and helping push these people's wheelchairs around. What can you do? And like the ripple effect of having it on the people in your life. That somebody in my other class, like, she's the oldest, and she said she noticed she started eating 3 pieces of fruit, that her little siblings started eating more fruit because they want to be just like their big sister. Or you were saying your sister never cooks, and now she's starting to cook because they have fun cooking with another person in the family. And so it's taking those steps, and it's one meal at a time. So it might be one meal, but it is that gluten does induce pleasure. I think I said, it might be in this, but it was in the talk I was, and you do have withdrawal. I went through this, everybody does. And yeah, I remember when I was in Nepal, this is 10 years ago. And so it was before I'd given up gluten, and there's no bread in Nepal. They don't eat bread in India and Nepal. And it was the summertime. So they actually do have bread during the tourist season. The summertime was the monsoon season. I was like, why are we going in the monsoon season? And there would be these German bakeries, and they were all closed because there were no tourists. And the local people they were eating dal bhat. And then I found this one place and it wasn't bread though. I forget. I think they made brownies. And so I go there every day at the end of the day, and Joey and I would get our one brownie. But it causes your intestines to actually release this protein, apparently, that creates the leaky gut issues. And there's actually more to it, and I didn't have time to look into it, but I hope to. But the tight junctions, it's not just the gluten in there that's causing this. They were saying it's the lignans in there, which I'm not sure if that guy was correct or not. But anyway, that you're absorbing these partially. I mean, one of the big problems is this guy who changed wheat, who won a Nobel Prize for doing it, because we were going to feed the world, because we suddenly could harvest wheat twice a year. He actually changed the structure of the proteins, and so we are unable to digest it. We can digest it partially, but so peptide, so when you eat starch, the enzyme that digests starch, so starch is just glucose, and so the enzyme cuts it into 2 glucose pieces. So you have 1,000 glucoses, and so it'd be like, again, I give it to Miranda and she cuts it every other. And so it's called maltase, and then passes it on. And then the next row is Stephen, excuse me, he cuts them each into individual glucose, and then we absorb it. So what happens though with proteins is it's different. Our pH of our intestines wiggles it apart, and then, you know, we'll say Josie has the scissors and she can only cut between methionine and alanine. So the peptidases can only cut between certain amino acids. There's one called that cuts always the carboxy end. And so it has to start at the end and it can cut the last one off, one at a time. That's going to take forever. Your body doesn't have that much time to do that. So these other ones cut. And so we're cutting it into small pieces. And then this other one cuts at the ends. But we can no longer cut it into the small pieces because there's no like methionine, alanine. I can't remember what the thing is in the gluten when he modified it. And he didn't do that. He had no idea. We had no idea. But anyway, it's cholera is why we cook food. If you go to one of the reasons why when you go to most other countries, you don't eat raw food. And that's because of the bacteria and cholera. And you get Montezuma's revenge or something, that you get diarrhea. And so your body's trying to flush this out. And so even though that looks amazing, it's, yeah. One of the other things these guys talked about with the microbiome, they all said it's diversity of food. And it's one of the things that happened with the paleo. And so the one video, even though it said it was posted 2 years ago, the talk had to be like 5 to 8 years old because that's when paleo was a fad. And everybody was doing almond flour for everything. So the whole idea with paleo is you can't do any of the harvested like grains and stuff. And so you can use almond flour. And so everything's with almond flour. They were having almond flour for breakfast, pancakes, almond flour for lunch, almond flour for dinner. And if you're eating only one kind of food, you're going to create things that aren't going to work. And so our microbiome is so diverse. And the more diverse it is, the better it is. And so that whole thing, the broccoli chicken diet that I talked about the first week, that's like one of the worst things you can, and broccoli is wonderful for you, but you can't just eat one kind of food. You want to eat a variety of food. Anyway, so, and the reason there are these pictures online is because the addiction is the same as heroin in that they're interacting with the same receptor. So the opiate receptor is what heroin and morphine bind to, and none of us want to be a heroin addict. Like we're in an age where if you're going to go into healthcare, it's really bad. They will all tell you how bad it is working in the ER, and the people were just dropped off. We're here in Portland. That's a huge part of our homeless situation is the amount of drugs. Morphine is what's given in the hospitals for people in severe pain or end of life. Hospice does a lot with morphine. And so like my dad, I remember when hospice came and she gave him a double or triple dose. And she said morphine helps him to make the transition. It basically helps you to stop breathing. And my dad was at a point where he needed that help because he had a neurological disorder. And when they took they'd asked my mom if they should intubate, and she didn't understand the question because he had a do not revive thing, and they suddenly put the thing in and rushed him to the hospital. And so at that point, I'm like, well, you might as well keep him on it for 3 days while we all get there, right? And then they pulled it out. I got there, and an hour later they pulled it out, and my dad didn't wake up, but he didn't die. And then we took him home in a bed, and he still didn't die. And then I'm sitting there, and I'm like, this is like, you could go on like this for months and months and months, and how draining that could be for the family. And so I sat down next to him when nobody was around and told him I would take care of my mom, and it was okay, because sometimes they have to hear that. But anyway, then the hospice lady came and was extremely gracious. But morphine is binding to this. And then there was this whole rush to, what can we do if we have something? Morphine comes from the poppy plant. If we have something, I had a student in my other class just did a paper on morphine and the whole opiate wars that were in China back when the Brits took over a lot of Asia and stuff. So they had taken over India and Hong Kong, and how the Chinese, but there was, in the past 50 years, trying to find if we have a receptor in our body. They found the receptor first for something outside. There must be already something inside of us, and they found them. They're called endorphins. And so endorphins are one of many neurotransmitters that are amazing. And I have a picture, and it doesn't look anything like those molecules up there, but there's a part of the molecule, how it is that it fits beautifully into the receptor, even more beautifully than what's naturally in our body, to overstimulate the receptor. And so you get this effect. So the opiate receptor is what gluten binds to, just like morphine and heroin. And that's why you don't want to give it up. And so if you're in that mindset of, well, no, I can't, I'm a certain age, I can't give up gluten, that's like part of my diet. You're a certain mindset, not a certain age. So schizophrenia, autism, pretty much everything responds to no gluten, as does an attitude. And this is fascinating to me. So this is what is given to the heroin addicts, and it's also given to like every kind of addicts now. But it's marketed under a different name because people don't want to say, oh, well, I'm on naloxone, because everybody knows that's what's given to heroin addicts. And anyway, it's fascinating to me. That's oxycodone, which is a whole nother issue. There's all the opiates that people get as prescription pain meds, and they were just given out like candy for 20 years, and people became addicted to them. And yeah, anyway, they also lost weight because it decreases your food consumption, which is different from gluten, because when you eat gluten, you increase your food consumption. But naloxone decreases your food consumption. And so there's a picture of it. And so you can see they all have, even without taking chemistry, you can see if we rotate them, they're all almost the same thing. This guy has this extra piece, which probably creates a different kind of blockage or stimulation of the receptor. And so it is, the receptor is a receptor for pain perception. And so when this receptor, you bind something to it, you change your perception of pain, in that you don't feel pain. And so that's the key. It's a perception. And so if it's a perception, we are human, and we have a capacity nothing else on this planet has, which is this idea of perception, that it really is all in our mind. And you don't need chemicals to change that perception. You need a change in your mindset. But anyway, these receptors are all over our body. They're not just in our nervous system. So they're on our immune cells. So ponder that. And so if you're suddenly giving people all this oxycodone, for pain, you're changing their immune system response too. You're changing their digestive response. And so this is the molecule that is naturally in us. There's alpha and beta endorphins, and the beta one's really cool. I don't think I have a picture of it. It makes a ring structure, and it must have something, because this is like they show this is 8 amino acids, and it must be how it folds into its whole structure that these two must end up close to each other, so you get kind of a look like that, but it's going to have extra pieces, so it does it just the right amount. Whereas these molecules are so much smaller, they're like overstimulating it, and you feel no pain at all. I know several years ago I had a bike accident, and I'm pretty sure I broke my sacrum. And I didn't go to the hospital because there's absolutely nothing they do for you except give you oxycodone, and I wasn't going to become a drug addict. And you would not believe how many people told me they could get me pills. Like everybody was like, I can give you some. And I'm like, no, I just had to give my body a chance. And it took me, I live a mile away. My therapy was walking to school, and it took me over an hour to walk to school for the first week. Yeah, and so it was slow. It took over a month. And to get out of bed was half hour. I started going to my PE class, and it was one of those sitting on the balls, you know, and doing different things. And so I hadn't been for 2 weeks, and I'm like that front row person. I remember, and so we did something. We had to get up off the ball, and everybody was like 5 exercises on, and I'm like finally standing up, and I'm like, I stood up, and they were probably all looking like the old lady in the front, going, "Wow, she's in bad shape." But anyway, it would have taken a lot longer if I'd taken all these meds. So anyway, naloxone blocks it. And the only place in your body that actually does not have receptors for endorphins is your brain, which is kind of funky. And so that's the cartoon why they can smack the brain. So the endorphins were often called, so the runner's high. Incorrectly, because the runner's high is actually anandamide. It's probably a combination of them. So anandamide is what THC is mimicking, so from marijuana, and anandamide is another neurotransmitter that helps the release of dopamines and endorphins and creates that high you get. So those of you who love running and exercise and stuff, and you just feel like after, that's what's going on. So it's a combination, it's not just one of them. Anyway, and so casein is the next one. And so my closest friend went, and he had a food intolerance test done, and I've never seen a food intolerance test like this. I've seen lots of people, I've heard lots of people I work with who are your other beloved teachers, and they have a food intolerance to everything. So all they do is they prick your ear, they take a drop of blood, and they send it off to a lab. And his came back, and I'm like, well, I want to see it, right? So we're over at the naturopath, and they print it out, and I'm looking at it, and it's 2 pages, and it's marked wherever you have a food intolerance. And he's going through every possible issue, digestive pain and everything. And it's all because they put him on insulin. And insulin has so many side effects. He has only one food intolerance, and it's dairy. And it's got to be the casein and the whey, because he can actually have butter. Butter was the only thing he was allowed to eat. There was absolutely no other food intolerance. There was not a wheat intolerance, no grain of any kind, no meat of any kind, no fruit or vegetable of any kind. And I've gone through listening to so many people, and they'll list off their 20 things that they can't eat. And I'm like, why don't you just eat real food? And so casein, most people know that milk, they're like, yeah, I can't have low lactose. And so they take the lactase or whatever, and they're like, yeah, I'm doing fine. There's a picture of cheese behind this, and cheese and casein are similar names. So casein is one of the proteins in cheese. So when I say you're going to give up wheat or cheese this week, or meat, you can pick which one you want to give up, or you can be like, you don't have to do all of them. And you're like, well, I'll give up dairy, but I'm not giving up my cheese. It is because cheese is almost all casein, and this one came right after that, right? So you can have fun with. Casein is actually, again, just the sequence of the amino acids. Our body doesn't digest it. And so you get all this phlegm. When I was 30 years ago in school for Chinese medicine, that was one of the first lessons, that people come in with cold, phlegmy stuff. You got to take them off dairy for the week, because dairy is phlegm and it's going to make more phlegm. And so that really struck home. And so whenever I'm sick or have respiratory stuff, I don't do dairy at all anyway, but for all of you, it's something to think about, that if you have phlegm and you're feeding yourself something that has that consistency. And we changed it, and this has been in the past 5 years, it's now ultra homogenized. So homogenization is that if you actually milk the cow and look at the milk will separate into layers, because the fat will come to the top, and it will separate. And homogenization is they run it through this thing and they break up the fat particles. And so they're so small, we don't see the separation. And they also put it through high heat. So pasteurization was what Louis Pasteur is famous for, is heating it kills the bacteria and stuff. And that actually changes the structure of the proteins. So these micelles form, these pockets are naturally formed, and all of this, the ultra homogenization and the even higher heat, because they can blast it faster, and everything's about money and how fast we can get stuff ready. So this is little Miss Muffet sitting on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. So casein is the curds, and then whey is going to be the whey protein. That's the next slide. And the spider comes down and is telling her those curds and whey are probably killing her. And so again, we don't digest it fully because it's the wrong sequence, and a lot of digestive issues. And so since it's not going to be fully digested to single amino acids, you're going to have these tripeptides or pentapeptides that are passing through. And people were like, no, I eat cheese perfectly fine. I don't have any of those problems. And then, right, a lot of skin issues have to do with dairy as a whole, but especially cheese. And ask yourself, it was one of the things this guy said, is, are you the person who you're craving something and you want that piece of bread or that piece of cheese? And often that thing that you're craving is the thing your body least needs. And you're craving it because, and the reason it's addictive and why, I just went back over all the opioid stuff, is casein is an opioid. And so it is addictive. And so, by the way, chocolate has an opioid in it too. So dark chocolate does. And so that's my opioid addiction. That's why it's almost impossible for me. Steven's the same way. I'm like, you know what? There's so many polyphenols in dark chocolate that I'm figuring I will balance it out. And so it's everything in moderation. But this is absolutely why people don't want to give up cheese. Is it actually is changing your perception. And so now you're aware of that. You can keep saying, nope, I'm not going to give up cheese. But it really is that full week. You have to, for 7 days, and eat, or gluten. And it's when you go back and start eating it. So you might be like, no, I don't get bloated, constipated diarrhea. Jared shared a story with me over a month ago about cheese. And he suddenly realized cheese was causing these issues with him, and he simply gave up eating cheese, and it was like in a day. For women, menstrual symptoms are almost always caused by dairy. You give up dairy, and within it's gone by that cycle. It's that fast, and that includes cheese. So it can't be, well, I'll give up milk, I give up ice cream, because there's so many other choices, right, for whatever it is you need, but it's got to be all of them. So this is Dr. Neil Bernard. He's from North Dakota. Absolutely love listening to him, because there's something about people from North Dakota, and they have that, you know, that down to earth. His dad was a doctor in this small town. He grew up eating cheese and dairy and meat and everything, and went to medical school. And his dad was in his 60s, and his dad got Alzheimer's, and his dad was just giving insulin to everyone. Everybody in North Dakota was diabetic, and at some point, Neil took a look at all of this and changed his perception. And so I'm pretty sure he is the founder he's the director, at least, of the Physicians. Now I'm not going to remember the name of it. I think it's Physicians Advisory Committee. That actually sued the federal government, I think it was almost 20 years ago now, about the food pyramid and how it was controlled by the meat and dairy industry, basically. And so he is vegan and stuff. And so that's the only thing I will warn you. I don't like, yeah. Anyway, but he talks about, he has a book that came out, and I've been trying to find it and I can't find it. They're just YouTube interviews with him, of him and this book. But it talks a lot about the whole thing, that it's the casein, morphine addiction and the issues with dairy, that dairy's been totally modified. If you live on a farm and you are able to get your milk fresh, there are people who can't, there are places around that actually will sell you the milk that hasn't been changed and ultra homogenized and stuff. There are benefits that you can get from that, but you have to know your source and stuff.
Is it legal to sell raw milk?
I don't know if you can anymore. And so you'd have to know them, and it would have to be probably a money transaction. I know people who get it from somebody. And so I don't know. You couldn't, you used to see it in certain stores, but I don't see it anymore.
You think it is illegal?
Yeah, because I remember reading about something about the raw milk, and that
I know it's illegal in California.
People used to drink it a lot, but now, like, since the regulations and all that stuff,
When did these new regulations come out? I mean, I haven't drank milk myself in a long time, but I thought raw milk was like a kind of popular thing at health stores and stuff, though.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't do milk at all, and I'm fine without it. So, right. So raw milk is very different from what is in the store, where it's been so changed and everything. Yeah. And I keep forgetting to bring the cheese from Nepal that I have. And so so you guys are picking, hopefully you've already started it, your 7 days of either saying no to dairy or no to gluten, and you're eating, oh, this is the proteins in milk, so which are the curds and whey. And so that is a picture. We talked last class. They make these beautiful, elaborate, huge structures. And so those rings in there are alpha helices and stuff. And so that's what curds would look like. And there's the cheese curds at the cheese curd factory, which are wonderful and glorious. And we used to always go there when Joey was a kid to get the cheese curds. But and then a lot of people who are bodybuilders take these supplements, and this is Joey. So if you get to go ever to Nepal and go to the cheese factory there, absolutely eat the cheese. And they adopted him as their little brother. And so this is this huge copper pot, and the people would bring the milk and they would be making cheese, and the cheese is a hard cheese. I think I talked about it before. Curds are also the brush on paintbrushes traditionally, until we made plastic, and also on toothbrushes. And whipped cream is curds, is casein, and Elmer's glue has a picture of a cow on it because that is how glue is made. And so I've debated if we're going to do that in our lab in 106. Because it does work. That's what a lot of stuff that's stuck on the wall, we've made glue, and then we stick things on the wall with it. But it is, so it gives you a different perspective. You can make glue with the same thing that you're making cheese with. So the cheese we made in class, there in my chemistry class, was the cheese curds. To make the hard cheese, you have to have an enzyme, because you have to actually cause digestion of the cheese to make the harder cheese. And that enzyme is isolated from the gut of calves, baby cows, one of the stomachs, the second or third stomach. And so that's a whole nother thing. But people who make cheese at home, and I can't remember now, I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of this enzyme, And so then the other one is the whey. So curd is casein and then whey is whey. It is a protein. So again, they're not huge proteins. There's our alpha helices for those who've done this with me before, and apparently can buy a bag of whey like that. And I was at my sister brother-in-law's house. Joey's like, come here, come here, come here. And they have this beautiful home. And like, I have dreams about kitchens because my kitchen's tiny. And they have these huge cupboards, and Joey just opens them up, and it's just filled with jars of whey protein and protein bars and stuff. And I'm just like, so, but the mindset is he's completely convinced, his trainer has convinced him he needs that. And so I'm like, there's nothing I can do, Joey. And so after in class, we curdled milk by adding like lemon or something, which is going to denature it, and the casein comes out. The liquid, what we didn't keep was the whey goes through in the liquid. So I don't know if you remember when we filter it, and that's called, actually the full name is lactoalbumin. And so is it healthy? That studies show that consuming it after exercise will help your muscles become stronger. And so that is why whey protein is always shown with the guys muscle building, and that people after the workout, they have their protein drink or their protein bar, because whey protein actually helps your muscles get even bigger and stronger. And that's just me being silly, that that's really kind of what a lot of these guys are looking like, and girls, because it's actually a bigger issue now with women and our body type. And so there is something about, you may have heard of them, they're called BCAA, which is branched chain amino acids. And if I pull back up the amino acid ones, but more for those who've had some of the chemistry, it is the non-polar amino acids in that chart. So leucine, isoleucine, so they have like either an isopropyl group or an isobutyl group or a sec-butyl group. So there's 3 of them, and they're the considered the branched chain amino acids. And you can watch YouTube videos galore about the branched chain amino acids, and they're essential and how much they help increase muscle protein and help with weight loss. And they're absolutely right. And they help with the body fat index, and they decrease insulin and triglyceride profile. And they're really high in whey protein, and everything has a dark side. And they'll always be at the end to add the little thing that says, oh yeah, and it does promote cancer. And so to me, that's like, really? And there is too much of anything, because there is another dark side that we will see, but we'll talk about cancer and diet and milk. So prostate cancer and the link to dairy products is actually huge. In Japan, there was almost no prostate cancer before World War II. And so after World War II, after we bombed the bejesus out of them and flattened their country, we went over and said, we'll rebuild you. And that was really nice of us. And we introduced dairy to them. Now they're an island country. They really have no place for cows. They don't have a place to put their garbage or the cow manure and stuff. But anyway, we introduced milk, and we said to be advanced. This is during the Korean War. I don't have this slide on here, but I've read this study so many times. My dad actually fought in the Korean War. And when they autopsied all these young men who fought in the Korean War and died, and the Koreans and the Americans, these are 18, 20-year-olds. The Americans all already had heart disease. They had blocked arteries, 18 and 20-year-old men. And they looked at the Koreans and they did not. And they said, what happened? Because that wasn't an issue before. And it was, I'm pretty sure it's in the 20s or the teens, somebody might know better than me, is when the lunch milk program started. And we had milk given to every kid at school. You guys all know them. You went to school where you got those little milk. When I was in school, they were 5 cents. I think they're free now, that every kid can get. And you can get the chocolate milk, which Amber asked me about chocolate milk. And so chocolate milk's gotta have lots of sugar in it. I don't know. It's like I have more sugar than milk. But she was saying that because her coach told them to just take ibuprofen, but also encouraged that they drink a lot of chocolate milk, which I just was think that's really funny. But chocolate milk, that sugar is addictive. It's not an opioid, but that's why we all love chocolate milk. And it's not actually chocolate in there. I'm pretty sure it's like a fake. When I was a little girl, it was the strawberry milk, and I would every day add the strawberry Nesquik because it was pink. And speaking of pink, I made you guys. They're pink. They got squished. I'm sorry. And the pink disappeared, but I didn't have black beans because since we're doing lentils, that's what you're trying to give up. You are giving up for 7 days, and maybe you're going to expand it to the whole month. Gluten or dairy or something, and you're eating beans just once a day. Somehow you can incorporate, and again, they don't have to be lentils, they can be peanuts, they can be peas, they can be green beans. Anyway, I didn't have black beans to make my absolute favorite brownies or black bean brownies. These are actually lentil. I found lentil here. I know it sounds weird. They do have chocolate chips in them and cranberry because it turned out I didn't have raisins as well as black beans. And so I was like, you got to be kidding me. Somebody has a recipe for lentil muffins. And so they were really pink. And then when I cooked them, the pink disappeared. I have a thing about pink. Some of them are darker because I added extra cacao to them. Because why not add extra cacao? And if you're going to add chocolate, you have to get it as cacao. So it has to actually say CACAO. You don't want to get the Dutch processed. You want to get the raw because in the Dutch processing, there's a heating and it does change the structure. And anyway, I thought it was interesting that you could do anything with any kind of legume. But it's funny. It made me think of Erin. Erin would have just walked behind me and sat here for a while in our other class. Anyway, so they saw a 25-fold increase in prostate cancer after we went to help them. And what they started to look at is, well, why did we suddenly see this huge increase in prostate cancer in Japan after World War II? And we also introduced eggs. So the consumption of eggs went up, the consumption of meat went up because that means you're more advanced. It was the consumption of dairy. So Asian cultures traditionally do not drink dairy. They might make curds. They might have a little bit, like when I was in Nepal, you might have had some curds as like the yogurt, or they might make cheese, but their cheeses are very different. It's a hard cheese because it has to last for a long time. And it was the dairy. And so then they did, and this is just one study, this is from Dr. Greger's book, he talked about it, that they took prostate cancers or prostate cells in petri dishes and they dripped cow's milk on it. And they repeated this 14 times. And every time they would see an increase in the cancer cells. So about 30% increase, which you're like, well, 30%, it's still cancer. It's still prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is awful because it's really hard to find because prostate, there's the dark side of the prostate that you can't see. Like the dark side of the moon, we never see the other side of the moon where the transformers landed and all that stuff. So it's not that it's dark, it's just that it's never facing us. So we don't see it unless we send a satellite to the other side. Anyway, so if you get a chance right after sunset, go out and look towards the sunset and you'll see the crescent moon. So it's the new moon past, and then it's going to rain for the next 5 days. So you won't get to see it again. And when they actually did the same experiment with almond milk as the control, it actually suppressed the growth of any of the cancer cells, which fascinated me. I'm not a huge proponent of the nut milks. Most of the nut milks have something in them called carrageen. So unless you make it yourself, it's the easiest thing to make yourself. You just soak the nuts. I soak them in warm water. Somebody asked me why, and that's just because I am not a good forward thinker. So you can soak them overnight, like overnight oats, in a mason jar, and then you blend them, and then you're supposed to put them through what's called a nut bag, which they're named for that you allow the stuff its white stuff will come through, and that's the milk. I just use the whole thing because I'm like, well, why not have the fiber and everything? Cashews are really good at this because cashews give a really creamy, and that's the whole thing behind, you can make cheesecake with cashews. I'm not a fan of the texture of cheesecake, so, but anyway, most of the commercial almond milks have an additive called Carrageen, so it's Careerghan, I think is how it's spelled. Almost everybody has a sensitivity to it, so it's an emulsifier, something, it smooths it, it gives it that smooth texture that we like with milk. I have a definite sensitivity to it because I couldn't figure out what was going on, and you get bloating, you get all those things that I was talking about. Some people could be skin, everybody's going to have a different thing. I get soy milk at the tofu store, and they don't have any fillers, and they don't add anything, and it's so easy to make your own soy milk too. But anyway, and when they did the meta-analysis, the problem with meta-analysis is it's a computer analysis, and they can go in and you can look for anything. And what's happened in the past couple of years is everybody's doing meta-analysis, and most of the people doing meta-analysis don't have any statistical background, and so you can confirm anything you want. So you have to be a little bit careful with things anymore. But when they went back, and so some of the older ones are actually more reliable because it was when actual scientists were doing it. When you look at prostate cancer list and the things, it's always going to be the veggies, especially garlic is a huge one, the alliums, and the super fruits. Are mangoes up there? So fast. Kiwis are. So this was interesting. You guys need to read her paper, but talking about mangoes today, it was something in her paper. Kiwis are the #3 allergen. They're ahead of peanuts for allergy causing. And so I was like, I had no idea kiwis or mangoes, that whole thing. Yeah, it was the only thing that was higher was milk and eggs. So a lot of people actually have allergies to milk and eggs. Most people don't know they have an egg allergy. Asthma is actually one of the symptoms. And a lot of children with asthma, you take them off of milk and eggs and their asthma clears up. And so it is actually really fascinating. But parents are like, well, what am I going to feed them if I'm not giving them milk and eggs? And you know what they're going to feed them? Fruit Loops. So it's like this whole thing that we have to retrain how to eat real food again. And so I guess oatmeal, apples. And so that's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And is Arnold the one who's Meatless Monday? Anyway, there's one of the videos you have a choice to watch this week. There's a bunch of different choices, but one of them I have not seen because I don't have Netflix. You have to have Netflix for it, is The Game Changers. And it goes through a whole bunch of bodybuilders, but a whole bunch of world-class athletes. It's like 5 years old now. You've seen that one, I know. And these are guys who, and it's like Tom Brady and also the guy from Wisconsin, Aaron Rodgers, they have given up animal products. The guys who are all at the top of their game, and again, it gives them advantage for endurance and stuff. Tom Brady, he's got a whole mental thing too. He has a whole program he puts people through, and it totally changes their life, and it has to do with the mental aspect. But again, it's a myth. I teach a kids class called Mythbusters, and so it's the idea to get enough protein, you have to eat animal products. My favorite on here is that they have like the nuts, and I don't know if those are peas or edamame, it's hard to tell, but eggs. So my other class, I have to do the flip grid, and the one guy in there is like, well, don't tell Dr. Sherpa I said this. And I'm like, I listened to every one of your flip grids. It's so funny because I guess they don't know, because I don't leave comments, that like when I'm walking home today, I listen to all their comments, and they're really sweet and funny. But so yeah, eggs. So my mom gave up meat. She eats fish occasionally. And she's 87 and doing great. She grew up on a farm, and she's like, I'm not giving up eggs. I wish she would get a better source of eggs than where she goes to get them, but she's 87. Certain things I'm not going to change. So eggs, so again, prostate cancer. And what they found was these were men who already had prostate cancer, but was an early stage prostate cancer. And the biggest correlation they found for the men who progressed to more advanced stages where it becomes much harder because it starts spreading through the body, and those who did not, was their egg consumption. And this is not a lot of eggs per week. And again, it's, if you're going to eat eggs, you should, like here, it's so easy because we live out here. You can find farm fresh eggs. Everybody's selling them, or you probably know somebody, like people right now are trying to give them away because they have so many eggs. And you get all the different colors and stuff. And you'll know they're good because they'll have a red yolk, because the yolk has an antioxidant that is there to keep cholesterol healthy. Anyway, and it's not the egg yolk that's the issue, it's the egg white that is the issue with prostate cancer. So anyway, they had double the amount of metastasis. There's probably more to the correlation than just eggs, because often it will be other things they're eating. There was only one thing that was actually worse, and mortality is the death rate. But they're almost seeing a doubling of the death rate. And the only thing that was worse in this correlation was chicken. And so store-bought chicken, Chick-fil-A. I had, my other class was very angry about this. And they got angry. And I realized the issue was how I presented it. So we've gone through carbs, we've gone through lipids, you've seen things, and we're now in the 6th week. They've been doing math problems and stuff. And then I suddenly threw this at them. And several of them are angry. And they're like, sure, Tom Brady might be doing awesome and blah, blah, blah. But I'm not doing that. There's no way. There's no way. I'm like, okay, pick one of the other choices. Don't get angry. And then I'm like sitting there going, if you're getting angry. And then one person is not the healthiest looking person as far as body shape and stuff. And they're like, I'd rather die at 70 and be happy and eat all the meat I want than to live to be 100 and not go to Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, oh, if you're going to,
Yeah, right.
you're gonna have you might make it to 70, but you're gonna have a stroke and be living like you're working these homes and stuff. And so yeah, so if it's something Stephen's taught, maybe not. I get to read all of your papers that you guys turn in, so sometimes I forget if they've talked about it and stuff. But if you're going to eat meat, you got to get a better source of meat than at the store and stuff. Or you can do like the choice Rand and I both made, which is, I'm like, that's too much work. I'm just not going to eat meat unless somebody's going to bring me, like they've gone hunting and they've killed the animal or fishing and stuff. And so I know it's a good source. So chicken got changed in the past 20 years. So chicken was a healthy choice. And chickens now never leave their cages. And that is so that they are fatter. They're like 80% fat now, as opposed to being this protein source. They're actually, and so the men who ate the most chicken had a 4-fold increase in metastasis of their prostate cancer. And this is why that chicken actually is really high in one of the amino acids, and I'm not going to remember which one, but it's one of the ones that has the phenyl group on it. Oh, it must be phenylalanine, and the combination with creatine, that our liver changes it, or cooking it, sorry. When you cook it, you make it into fat, which is that heterocyclic amine. And so heterocyclic means we have multiple circles, and then we have a nitrogen group. And it just builds up in the muscle. And it was something somebody said also, this one person who said they'd rather live to 70 and have fun than live to be 100 and be healthy, which the argument was fascinating still. But there was obviously a lot of anger and a lot of sleep deprivation and stuff. And it's the 6th week of the term, and I know everybody's going through midterms and catching up and everything, but think about what you're writing there and take a moment before you hit submit and say, whoa, did I really just write that? The one guy actually wrote a note to me and said, I'm sorry if I started getting angry there. I was sleep deprived and I needed to drink my Red Bull to wake up. And so I'm sitting there going, Okay, let's look at what we're writing here. So that's hopefully in this first month of the class that you've started to become aware, like several of you've said, holy moly, how much I've changed in 1 month. We're halfway, we still got a month to go. And so that's really my goal for the class. Whether we know what vitamin A does, which is totally a myth and stuff. But anyway, so it is how you cook it, which hopefully is the next slide. And it is the high heats. There's certain things, I've talked about this before. So the broiler, when you put it in the oven, the top part of the oven sends heat down. That's called the broiler. That sends a huge amount of heat down, and that is like guaranteed you're going to make this. So it's never actually been used in my oven. Joey asked me what it was. My ovens never make it very long anymore because ovens are made to be disposable, and I actually cook in my house. Most people's ovens last because they don't cook. Frying, because oils go to a much higher heat, and then you get all this oxidation, and then you're going to create this, and then grilling. But the big problem really with chicken, besides the grilling, Chick-fil-A, think about it, they're deep frying that stuff, and then it's breaded, and I don't even know what else is the barbecue sauce. So if you have not, you can go and read barbecue sauce, and the first 4 ingredients are going to be fructose and sucrose. It's going to be some kind of sugars. And so the sugar in the barbecue sauce combined with the protein and the high heat, it's a guarantee you're going to make the advanced glycation end products. And so, yeah, eat more. This is the chart from my garden. Let's see if Joey's going to rototill today before the mud fest starts again. I don't think he's in Game Changers again. I haven't gotten a chance to see that because I don't have Netflix. But there are so many of these guys now who are bodybuilders, and they've given up meat. And so when these people say, there's no way you can, I want to be big and strong. However, with that, there are some people, everybody has a unique body type in our metabolism and stuff. We're 99.8% the same. And so I found that I can thrive actually when I stopped eating meat and dairy and eggs, and I can definitely tell it changed. It takes time. Stephen went through the same thing and found he was actually the opposite, that he does better when he eats meat, that because you went through a vegan time, I'm pretty sure, right? And he found his body started depleting and stuff. And that's one of the things is you have to find that balanced place for yourself. But the meat source that he's getting is high quality meat. And he's still getting all the vegetables and things like that. And nuts, it's a handful of nuts. It's not your whole meal. So advanced glycation end products. This is one of the best acronyms that has ever been coming up with. And so they are basically, they're going to create, there's that ROS, the radical oxygen species. Basically, they're going to create free radical havoc throughout your body. These pictures that you can find online drive me crazy because I'm a biochemist and I read it, I look at it and I'm like, I can understand it. And it's confusing as heck to me because there's arrows all over the place. Their arrows are crossing and this and that. And I think it's making people feel like they're smart when they make those pictures. But basically, the whole idea is if you're eating sugar, and it doesn't have to be glucose, fructose again is like 1,000 times worse than glucose and protein and the high heat, you're going to make these. And so it's that combination of the sugar and protein. So if you're going to grill, don't use barbecue sauce. Learn to make your own. You can make it spicy. You can make it amazing. But the store-bought barbecue sauces are pretty much all sugar. And so the receptor is actually called RAGE, which was like the best name for it. And this is just going to cause oxidation. This is like free radical havoc and inflammation. And that was one of the things in both talks. These guys, one of them was a clinical nutritionist, another guy was a doctor, and he's like, everyone, that's all you see now is inflammation. Everybody's coming in and it's pain. And these guys have been in the field for long enough. And it's something for me seeing that too. I've never seen so much inflammation, whether it's intestinal and digestive issues or just walking around and feeling pain. And this stuff just cross-links to everything. If you know anything about diabetes, all the long-term things with diabetes, this is it. And so it's cross-linking to your blood vessels, to your organs. Your organs aren't going to be any better. And again, fructose. And we're back in that fructose fad. So it comes and goes. And fructose is being added like to everything, unless you're eating it as whole food. So when you're getting it in fruit or honey, your body vibrationally knows what to do with it. And this is, again, I think I've had this somewhere, or I did this talk with the other class. One of the best quotes I saw from somewhere, I'm pretty sure it's from Dr. Greger, that you end up with clumps of useless debris that is pretty much resistant to your body's cleansing process. And so you have these clumps of useless debris in your body. I don't think it's resistant to your body's digestive and cleansing processes. It just takes time, and you have to get to optimum where you can. And so it's aging and diabetes. This is those things, those heterocyclic amines, which are one of the best indications that you're going to have a heart attack. You can actually get your blood tested right now. It's apparently a pretty simple test, and they can see what your levels are. And then you can eat one of these things and they can see an increase in the levels, like in moments and stuff. And so everything's going to have a small amount. I think this is incorrect because human milk is never supposed to leave. It goes right from the breast into the baby's mouth. And so that has to be, if they're going to do a test on it, it's suddenly been exposed to air, and that's going to create something. And so anyway, so we have these itty bitty amounts here, and you can see the top ones are pretty much chicken, and it's how they're cooking it. So it's the roasting, the broiling, sausage also, just because of what usually is done for most of them, and the cheeses. Yeah, boiled chicken is much lower because it's going to be boiled, but it's still, what's crazy is it's higher than the potato chips and like cereal. They don't have Fruit Loops up there because they couldn't do everything, I guess. So it's not just what you eat. I do have this slide. It's how you prepare the food. So endogenous, endo means inside. So these are things that are already inside of you. And going back to that previous one with the heterocyclic amines, maybe that's in this. So our body makes more of these within our body when we eat foods that are high in simple sugars. So whether it's glucose or fructose or what it is, exogenous means we're getting it from the outside, and that is the food that you're eating. And so if you're eating animal-based proteins are going to have age, and you're cooking them in high temperatures, you're exposing yourself to even more. So the glucose and fructose, your body's going to change it to that. And so the cured meat, so any kind of cured meats, any kind of lunch meats and cured meats, you're going to have the highest numbers of these. And then the high temperatures. So broiling and frying and barbecuing cause 1,000-fold. The other thing that should be added to this is attitude. So don't go to a barbecue like, or your birthday party that you have and they're grilling because it's going to be 72 degrees. People having joy in their life is the most important thing. And so you don't want to be that big naysayer. But again, don't douse it with a whole amount of the sugars and then put it to a high temperature. So they put people on the exact same diet, and they just prepared the food differently. And so the one group, it was steam and boiled, and I can't remember if it was like chicken and asparagus or what. And then the other group, it was the exact same meal, but it was broiled for 20 minutes. So cooking it much longer than it needed to. And so they saw that their arteries were not able to relax, and they had much higher levels of the age markers. And the thing that was fascinating with the study is they then reversed the two groups like the next week, and they saw the exact same thing happen. So it wasn't like you couldn't say, oh, it's genetics, that they're already healthy or whatever. Whoever was given the broiled food they ended up with the numbers were not good when they tested them right after. A reminder for chewing your food. And so that slows you down. And so that's something in the video. So Steven said, and I was laughing reading this thing because I'm the same way, that I often only chew my food. Like this guy in this video, he said, what's the average amount of chews that each person does for their bite of food? And it's 4. And I'm sitting there laughing because I'm like, yeah, I might be below average on this one because I will often just shovel it in. That's what the whole mindful eating. And there's a couple people who've told me that for the month of May, they're going to take it on because that 7 days was one of the hardest 7 days. Like eating the fruit or eating the broccoli, that was one thing, but, and it is challenging to say no to cheese for 7 days, but to really sit and not pull out your cell phone, not bring the TV on, not right. And it's really hard. Or to sit, Josie said she's going to do 1 meal a day in silence. I mean, not dinner because you're there with your family if you have that blessing and stuff, but to really sit in silence mindfully. And she said, she admitted, she's like, I have to get up a half hour earlier because I am eating my breakfast on the go. And so to really be mindful and sit and eat it, you're going to have to make that time and commitment in your day, and of eating really slowly every bite. I am like the best at, anyway, this guy, that was one of the things, was chewing your food, chewing it to the point of liquefying it. And he worked with people and helping them with weight loss. And he said this was one of the biggest things to get people to lose weight, because you start eating less, because the one guy was eating like half. He's like, well, I eat half as much as I used to, because he lost like 10 kilos, he said, in 1 month, which is 20 pounds. And they were like, what'd you do? And he said, well, I just started chewing my food, but I'm eating half as much. And they said, why? And he said, because my jaw gets tired from all the chewing. And so, and it's taking longer, and you get to a point after however long that you're like, okay, I'm done. But we really do. We all eat like in 5 minutes on the go. I got to be somewhere. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. My body needs to be nourished, not just by the food, but your thoughts as you're preparing the food and all of that, and being joyful with that. And so if you're going to a birthday party or a potluck, bringing something that is prepared in a healthier way. So if you're going to eat meat, don't prepare it like this. You can't eat the cured meat. And again, we've talked about this. This slide was kind of nice. I think I was 10 the last time I had a hot dog. But what are you going to do for your next 30 days? So, right, this, definitely don't do this. Pure meat, that's like pure nitrosamine. So this was one of the things they also found, and they don't know why, that the liver, people who eat meat make more of the nitrosamines, the heterocyclic amines, than people who don't, and they don't know why. And they don't know if it's that their bodies are used to doing that, of trying to detox something. But it's one of those research they're still doing. You know, I had a student who did this. I've seen like the noni fruit extract, but she was in Hawaii, and I guess the tree on the property was like this ugly fruit. And it's also used for like stain removal and stuff. Where I'm going. I think, oh, what happens? Arthritis, kidney disease, blockages, right? So more LDLs, neurological, which is every possible, any kind of cancer that you don't want to have, erectile dysfunction, eye health, and it's how you're preparing your food, and your source of food, and all the skin issues. And so food is better than medicine. You should let food be thy medicine. And so rather than eating that. So this is a YouTube, probably not going to watch it, but it is something that was for your week. Rather than coming up with your own recipe, I have the link to their website, or you can type it in and you're going to find a recipe of theirs. It can be a dessert, it can be anything. They are oil-free. I will say this, they do not use enough spices. And I think that's true for most cookbooks, that people mellow it out. But they don't use any refined sugars. There's no oils and stuff. So you can do a dessert. You can do, I don't know, you find something in there. I recommend you add more spices than they do. And that's what almost everybody says, that they're like, I wish there was more spices. So my other class made this beautiful mango salsa. I can see the pictures of it, and it was pretty amazing. And some of the ingredients you might not have, so you're going to have to improvise, but you're not adding the oils and the sugar and stuff. You're not doing that kind. So if you don't have like mango at home, but you have papaya, that would be a substitution. Not, well, I'm going to add Fruit Loops or something that's extremely unhealthy. This was actually a YouTube that came up. I was cooking and listening to something, and this one came up, this TED Talk came up after. And it just like completely part of me was horrified and part of me was fascinated, because meat, one of the problems with meat is how we grow it. And this is probably what our future is for people who are meat eaters, which if you're going to eat at McDonald's and stuff, this would be much healthier if we actually grew the meat in a laboratory than how the meat is grown for your hamburgers right now. So I had a student a couple of years ago ask me if he could do his presentation on cricket. And I'm like, well, it's a biochem class. And so it totally, but I was fascinated. And since then, it's actually all over the place. Well, not all over, but you can buy this on Amazon. It is cricket flour, just like almond flour. And he made brownies with it. And I was the first one to try a brownie. And so these are some of the images of why crickets are an amazing source of protein. So this is the environmental issue, that cows and then our other sources are not sustainable for the amount of water that they use. And this is, I think, the amount of land use. And so that doesn't make sense though. I can't remember, it must be land use. And then the greenhouse, the climate change from the cattle and the sheep are even bigger, that they're releasing in their burps and their farts. Whereas crickets, everything's going to release a little bit. And then the amount of protein that you're actually getting from the crickets. And it is, believe it or not, a complete protein, meaning it has all the essential amino acids. And so most people are like appalled, but everybody sits there, people sit there and eat a McDonald's hamburger or Chick-fil-A and not really think about it. But for some reason, every other culture eats insects, pretty sure, except ours. And so you're not eating the insect, you're not eating the crunchy. In this slide, also, a lot of people are like, ooh, bugs. But yet they're not disturbed by this picture up here. Now I'm saying, ooh, cows. These cows never leave that. They're like in that, and then they're pretty much force fed. That's why the ones they're saying, help me. This is not like my uncle's farm where the cows were meandering around 20 acres, just eating the grass every day. And then we'd go and watch Uncle Lou bring the cows in, and they would all follow him. And then he'd go in there and milk them, and we'd watch him milk them. It was fascinating. Like one of the greatest blessings of my childhood. That is totally different than these factory farms and this is a nice picture. And so the cow, they don't want it to move around because they want it to become fat. They don't want it to have muscle. And so these are crickets. There is a person, so you can see the magnitude. There's actually, I couldn't find the picture. The guy, when he did the talk, there's actually very artistic ways that they grow these, where they have these beautiful things. But this is actually in the Midwest, is one of the big places this is happening, because they know that a change is on the horizon. And so it's like either University of Kansas or Oklahoma or something. This is a huge field of research. And these are some of the cookies somebody made with the cricket flour. And so it's not the shell, but you can buy these already online, cricket protein bars. And so I thought, well, we should look at the food label to see if they're any good. And so there's the guy, the happy camper, making us our crickets. There's all different types of insects, but crickets, there is a reason for that. And the ingredients were actually, I was pleasantly surprised. So raw almonds. And so that's why the fat content, you should not, that's one of the things I also want to emphasize. The fat content, they show it first, and we've been all trained that fat content is bad, saturated fats are bad. That's not actually true. It is the source of the fat that is important. And so this part of the label is huge. That part is the part you want to be looking at, which is the actual ingredients. So almonds are a very healthy source of fat. And so that's where I'm pretty sure almost all the fat is coming from, probably also dates. So the only sugar is dates and honey, and I would assume it's raw honey. And coconut also has a sweetness. Raw cacao, yeah, and cricket flour is the protein source. So the other thing, and I forgot to look up the ratio, but another thing, if you make your own, is the ratio of sugar to fiber. That most things have fiber in there, but this is not processed fiber. This is like actual fiber in probably the almonds. I don't know what cricket flour. Look at that part. The other thing though that I found was really interesting, if you have a shellfish allergy, you can't eat crickets because the shell, so it's probably the same thing with the mango. Fascinating. Anyway, you knew that you couldn't have you
Yeah,
seen
they
them?
have the shell, so it's the same thing.
But it's, I just assumed always with shellfish, it had something to do with the ocean and the salts in there too, but it's the exoskeleton and just what it's made up of. And this is actually the same molecule, it's calcium. Well, actually, what is, it's a protein. It's an oligosaccharide. And so I thought we should look at other protein bars. These are not cricket ones. And so these protein bars are a blend of whey protein concentrate. This is where there's a problem. So if you're gonna do whey, you might as well drink real milk, and if you can find raw milk from somebody who actually has cows and raises them humanely. Corn syrup. This is my favorite one, Dietary Fiber, which is an oligofructose. And again, fructose is like 1,000 to 7,000 times more damaging than glucose. We just don't have a meter test for it at this moment. And this is great. I can't even say the word. And it's vegetable glycerin and sorbitol. Maybe it's on the next one. Vegetable oil. Oh, it's edible. This is it. It's edible vegetable oil. I'm like trying to figure out what the other type of vegetable oil is. So why don't we, instead of calling it edible, why don't we say highly oxidized, cancer causing? All oils are going to be terrible. And then, oh, let's get those other sweeteners in there. So the polyalcohols destroy your microbiome. They have found that those guys just destroy it. There's like no changing the balance. So if you eat animal products, you do. And so that's one of the things probably why Stephen found he had to eat animal products. We all have a different microbiome. We have it different from people even within our own families and stuff. And depending on what your bacteria is, and you can change it based on your food, but there's still going to be, there's going to be differences in there. And so some people can tolerate certain diets, but the way that you can really destroy it, it does rebuild. Everything rebuilds is any kind of the fake sugars, and those are the alcohols. So whenever you see anything ending with the OL, get rid of those, throw them out. Don't give them to the homeless shelter. We don't want to destroy their microbiomes too. And again, they're saying cocoa instead of the cacao. So the cacao, the CaCao is the raw. And right, the cocoa solids always amuses me. But yeah, it's all these different ways that we're isolating. There's like 3 different ways they're isolating the whey protein in there, which really worries me. Soy is like this amazing protein, and then we've isolated it and put it in because it's a cheap source of protein. And when you isolate it, then it's promoting cancer. And I'm pretty sure that's the same thing here, that once you isolate the whey out, that's what's promoting the cancer. And this really worries me because these protein bars, how many people, and they're like, it's a protein bar, it's healthy for me because it's a protein bar, because it has that name on it, and it's like purely processed. Make your own, learn to make your own. And so this is F factor. I don't even know what that is, but they have no added sugar because, so the first ingredient is soluble corn fiber. And when they make high fructose corn syrup, there's the leftover stuff. So that, if you guys eat corn, you've had corn, what happens? This is the best way to know what your passage through your bowels is. Eat corn, and then you have to watch. And it should be within 12 to 24 hours, the corn's coming out of you. And so I don't know what in the corn is soluble, but basically they're saying they're adding the sawdust, the stuff that was left behind that they couldn't use for anything else. They're putting in there and saying this is your soluble fiber that you're getting. And right, brown rice protein concentrate, peanut flour, chicory root has been a thing. Oh, here we go. The peanut oil, the palm kernel oil, and it uses stevia is their sweetener, which is better than all the alcohols. This is a student from my other class. In the second week, he was like, can you look at, tell me I shouldn't be doing any protein drinks? And I said, send me the label. And I'm like, okay, where do you want me to begin? This is very different when I had somebody send me a label last term, and I'm like, I need to talk to you. I need to know why you're on this. And it was, and we had to talk about it. And I'm like, you should keep doing it because it was definitely a high quality. This is not a high quality. He's getting it from his gym, from the trainer who's like probably making money off of it, but it's milk protein isolate, whey protein concentrate, right? So we're isolating all this stuff out, and then we're getting non-dairy creamers. So we're getting the sunflower oil. There's like 3 different types of oils in here. Tocopherols are a type of vitamin E, is a tocopherol, and that's to protect the flavor, not to protect all the oils that are highly oxidized. We have the soluble corn fiber again, which is a filler. We have more whey protein isolate. We have canola oil, and I forget where the sugars are. I don't know why I'm missing them, but the sugars are in here too. The different types of sugars, and it might be that was the sucralose. And oh, you know what? It's ACE K. So this is one of the artificial sweeteners. Its short name is ACE K. The K is for potassium. So acesulfame potassium destroys. This was the first one they showed. It just totally destroys. It kills all the microbiome. Like microbiome runs away. It's just like, what the heck are you putting in here? I'm out. I'm done. And then sucralose, because we have to add other. And then we have to hydrolyze the whey protein. I'm like, you gotta stop doing that. Yeah, throw it out. And then the protein 1 bar, again, that's what almost everybody gets because it's the cheapest one out there. And we have the soy protein isolate, the whey protein isolate. We have the alcohol that is sweet and destroys your microbiome. And so just because it says protein as the first word, I have had so many people tell me of people in their family who've had strokes at 30 or died, had a massive heart attack. And I'm pretty sure it's these protein powders and these protein bars, because we put the word protein and we think that means healthy, and it doesn't. This is very different from like the liver he was showing you. And I'm not going to go and eat liver. Although if I went hunting with somebody and they prepared me the heart and liver, I would probably try it. I don't know. Liver is an interesting texture. Texture is a hard one to get over. Go ahead.
One of the things with protein is the milky mushroom, which I also presentation.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I was going to ask you that actually. Did you want to do your presentation today?
As long as you're at a good stopping point in the matrix.
I think I am. I think I was just going to see what my next click does. Yeah, actually, it's a perfect stopping point. Do you have it? Do you have it on? How do you have it?
I emailed it to myself through Outlook. So
Okay. Yep. I'm going to pause the screen. And yes, we have one more presentation. And while she's getting ready, I am going to talk to you guys about your next presentation. So we're at the end of the 6th week. So you guys have your notes. So if you've been here, just write up what you did or what you learned, or your thoughts, or however you want to do it. Oh, actually, this piece, I wanted to keep that. Yeah, log in, however you log in. It's, the screen is blank. And so when you're ready, we just have to unblank the screen. And this is so you have the mouse. You guys, the next round of presentations are actually in 2 weeks. And so next week, it was scheduled for next week, but we're going to push it off. I had it over 2 weeks because I didn't know where I would be. It didn't blank. Yeah.
Should I close out?
You can close that. Just close it.
Okay.
Or there you go. And so our next topic, well, I'm going to finish up this because we're going to talk about actually acidosis and stuff, but it's vitamins. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, and it's probably because there are so many documentaries, not documentaries, it's actually in all the news things about the scam of all the vitamins and stuff. And so I'll run through them really fast, but it has that your topic is for you guys to each pick a vitamin or mineral. And so we can do that. And so you can overanalyze vitamin C and do a presentation on that. And the thing that's nice about that is it limits your scope. You can have a different vitamin or mineral. Or the other possibility is we could pick a phytonutrient instead, which would be like one of the polyphenols. So like what's in olive oil that makes olive oil so unique. So what do you guys think? Do you want to look at one of these vitamins where we overanalyze 8 nutrients? That is such a small piece of the whole puzzle. Or I can run through the 8 nutrients really fast in probably a half hour. Or you guys can pick a polyphenol. So you can pick red wine and do resveratrol. You can pick olive oil and do, I can't remember the name of it now, alpha-lipoic acid, glutathione. Any thoughts?
I already picked sodium.
Yeah, and you were hesitant.
What would you do?
Okay, how about I give you a choice? I just need topics so I know what I'm doing next Wednesday, what vitamins I'm going to cover and which ones you guys are. So I have to have topics by Monday, or you can email them to me, or you can put them. And well, she's pulling hers up. Your 33-day healthy April is due by Friday. Just do it today. Well, today's going to be 72 degrees. Do it tonight. Get your notes in also from this week. And you guys been eating beans? And then there's a couple of you who owe me last week's mindful eating, like half of you got your stuff in and some of you might be in there. Are you ready?
It's not presenting the way I want to, but it's kind of like all
Download. Just say okay. And we might have
I
to.
could put something like this. That's what I'm doing.
Might be able to download. But you
Yes.
like twice downloaded. There you go, and then you can go into, it does not present your number, but yeah, and your mouse is over here. I'm going to, yeah, they're there watching. Oh, I'm gonna stop recording. I'm sorry.